At one time, I had spent 18 years on the fashions of my ancestors, the Trahans and the Lavalleys, and that was all lost when I was robbed of title to our home through real estate fraud. But my printer helped me. A few that I had left were on my computer, but what I did have was over 3,000 pictures on my camera chip, and I downloaded a couple of hundred with the help of my printer, and I created an album. And then my dentist wanted to see the modeling and the fashions, because I designed, starting when I was a child, my own clothes, and taught to sew by my mother and my grandmother, which was part of our history. So I began to do a fashion album, and these are the 1940s, and me as a child, and my very first outfits that I made when I was 13. This is from 1953, my Aunt Carmen, and we were very fashionable in our plaids at that time. And that's my best friend Sandra. She and I used to sew regularly all our own clothes. And then, yes, my mother made her dress and I made mine, and that was my graduation. I was raped the first time a couple of days later, and that's my first job at City Hall in 1959. And the fashion was brocade, satins, and that was my girlfriend's wedding, and organza. And I was trained as a model at the age of 13, and Levine's in Sudbury, and I did it for Volunteer for Cancer, which we don't do anymore, unfortunately. But I loved fashion, and I continued to enjoy making my own clothes. And these were all from Levine's, which was very famous in Sudbury, Ontario, Canada. And that was my 1960. I lost my child. I had to give him up for adoption because of violence in my home. And then I had been date raped by a man who was married. And that's me in 1964 when I met Elizabeth Taylor, and I always looked great. But I started to cripple. I was 6 years old, to tell you the truth. And my mother was very active in the Mine Mill Union, and that's where I modeled with Max Vader and Nicole Moret and Makushla, all the Montreal designers. And they gave me these clothes as a gift. And these are 1968 predominantly. And I could this was a photographer who fell in love with me and my lovely green suit. And that was High Park in Toronto. I fled Sudbury when I was 19 and lived in Toronto for 23 years. And some of it was really wonderful and some of it was just terrible. That was my first wedding to a psychotic maniac who tried to kill me. And that was my favorite job, was with Falconbridge Nickel Mines, and they asked me to model for their Falconbridge magazine. But most of my photographs, the originals, were all lost. And my printer created an album. But of course, when I die, it'll all wind up in the garbage. And this is the fun 70s, 1970, 75, and my first home. And I'm glad I put the dates on some of them. And that necklace was a gift from the Falconbridge executives in Toronto. And that was my investment property on Dagmar. And I loved being outside when I could, but I was always taking paralyzing attacks. And I'm very proud of this picture of me. Yes, it's a nude, but I think I was beautiful. And my favorite friend for 12 years was my cat. She skied and danced and sailed with me and did everything. And that was when I went into the investment market as a real estate agent. Now, I had been working in investments since 1963, trained in the stock markets. But even though I took paralyzing attacks and didn't know what the disease that I was caused by being poisoned, That story's on YouTube. There's my grandmother making her quilt for me, the last one she made for me. And when 1984, I entered AA, and I was rescued by Dan McIsaac in 1985. And I was learning, he was teaching me to cook, which was pretty funny. I never had any help from my mother on learning to cook. And I was predominantly vegetarian and raw, and there's my lovely Tom Murphy. When a doctor tried to murder me, he rescued me, and in 1986, I was abandoned and left to die in a shack, and I had to use a gas mask to breathe. And that story is separate, of course, and I began to research diets for disease control. And that Wilson mask was horrible, but I survived. And I continued to research diets for disease control, and I did a number of articles. And this little boy, Timmy, at 9 years old, and little Jason, the two of them began to take care of me in that shack, and helped me learn and encouraged me to find a place where I could breathe without a gas mask. And and then I began to get the help of Americans. And local media began to publish articles on my research, because I knew, I saw visions always, and I knew that I wasn't alone. I knew that there were millions of children suffering and becoming victims and lives destroyed as mine was. So I was a fighter, and I did discover that canola oil was deadly toxic poison. It is a plant like poison ivy that was never meant for human consumption. And those are a few of the letters that I tried to get the government to help, but I failed in that. And that's when I flew to New York to test Obitrol to see if I could reverse the brain damage. And a neurologist got me the name of the disease as Parkinsonism. And I came back with that legal term, and I fought with the government and Health Canada and the Medical Association to get legal recognition for Parkinsonism, disease caused by chemicals. And I love that little mask. My masks were donated by MSA executives in Pittsburgh to help me research. And I temporarily did completely reverse the disease and brain damage. And I was so proud of how gorgeous I was. And this is in 1992. I am 52 years old, and gorgeous. So interesting that when I look at my pictures, I never realized how beautiful I really was. And that was my promotion when I discovered that in a vision that I could no longer get Obitrol, the drug, but what I could do was okra. Raw okra would do the same thing. So I had to regain memory and rejuvenate my brain. I had complete memory loss. And I finally got a lovely article in 1998. And I thought, oh, this will hit national media, and I'll be able to save millions of people. Well, that didn't happen, of course. It's very tragic that it remained the world's greatest mystery. And I was never able, so eventually I started to take paralyzing attacks. So I'd go from crippling to dancing and crippling to skiing. And this is just and then I started creating my own clothes. I started to sew again and designing. And this is my favorite. The Sun tabloid journalists and the Americans helped me the most. I never did get a lot of help in Canada, if any. In fact, I don't think I got very much of any. To tell you the truth, it was Americans that really rescued me and helped me with my research. But okra is the only thing that kept me going. I would literally paralyze in horrific pain and unable to walk. And that was in 2010. I was dancing, and I made the Sturgeon Falls newspaper at a fiddler's dance. And Dan and I got back together in 2009, and I started to create gowns, and I did ballroom dancing. And these are some of the gowns out of the literally thousands that I made for both my mother and I. And when we lost our home, of course, they all wound up in the garbage. But I have a few left. And, well, I really had some wonderful ballroom dance years, despite I continued to take paralyzing attacks. I never understood why until I was 72 years old. It was pesticides in the food. But those were some of my other gowns. I made them all. I designed them all, and they were mainly for ballroom and country dancing. And I began to ski. I did I used to go as much as from 10 to 12 kilometers a day, and then I slowly, and that was the best year of my life, 71 to 72. My body was 100%. I had the disease in complete remission. I didn't have one attack that year, and my immune system was perfect. And I never understood what took me down. But I was taken down very quickly in 2014 by a tumor that started to grow inside my leg. And but I still made gowns, and that was in 2014, 2015, 2017, and 2015. I just literally I'd go from death to dancing and crippled to skiing, and I have not been able to go to outside for more than 10, 15 minutes. No longer do I have hour-long walks. Now that was literally I skipped that pretty fast, but I crocheted that in 1975, and I was still wearing it in 2017. And those are some of my ski outfits. And that's my dear friend Jill that I take skiing with me. And that's the last year of my mother's life, and Dan helped me take care of her. And those are some of my ballroom dance. She's a dance instructor, and I continue to make what you see are the gowns that I made for dancing. And that is my favorite picture, the gowns that I made for my mother and I the last year that she was alive. And this is where I discovered what caused the real estate fraud in Canada and the laws that are completely corrupt. And I thought I could get media, but again, I failed. So it's all out on YouTube. And then my mother died, and I celebrated her life. And I went back ballroom dancing. That's the last gown I ever made. I no longer have the facilities to make gowns, but that's okay. I've got more than enough to last me 10 lifetimes. And those are everything you see I made. Now I was living with Dan now after I was robbed of my home, and we lost that apartment to another fraud, and I moved into an apartment with Dan, and it's got many issues, and I've been poisoned many, many times. And there's Francine, God bless her, and Ida, and Jill and Len, and Francine and Len and Ida, and another gown, one of the few gowns that I made. And this is where I began to COVID 2019. I was skiing, and I made COVID masks to go and cover my gas mask. But Dan hates the cold, and I don't have a lot of him, but I bought him a complete snowsuit. But mainly when I'm skiing, I'm in bathing suit tops and shorts, and that's some of my favorite pictures of those years. And I truly am grateful that despite my Parkinsonism and adversity, I'm 80 in September, and I have had quite the journey. And these are my fashions that I have preserved for history, I suppose you might say. And I make all of my pants Those are all new pants that I made to protect me from COVID, whether I'm skiing or outside. And the jacket was my gift to myself for Christmas. And that's Capriole in this early spring, and this is Moonlight Beach. And I use swing since childhood when I'm crippled to keep my muscles and my bones from turning to mush. And those are some of my COVID styles and the shorts that I made this summer. This is my favorite outfit that I made this year, 2021. And a favorite picture of the girls swinging with me this summer. And some of my public relations promotions that are on Facebook and YouTube and a free website. And then they're continued to take care of me on and off since 1986. I am very lucky. Most victims like me don't have anyone. We usually get abandoned by our family and friends. And this is a new outfit I made, again, just last month that I love. And my new shorts, and that's my legacy that I've typed and put out on my website. And I have 3 websites. One's for real estate and one is for the Diets for Disease Control. But this pretty much is the end of my journey. I am now spending the rest of my life